playing Astra Militarum in 40k currently isn't easy. Frankly, it's really bloody hard. We are 18 months into 9th edition of 40k, and Guard and only a handful of other armies don't have updated codexes. Tau just had their released, Eldari rules have been announced, and Tyranids are confirmed as being next. Astra Militarum exists with a codex released in 2017. That's right, 5 years ago. So what this means is that across the majority of games we play, our opponent's armies are more survivable, more accurate, and doing more damage. Sure, we had some new rules in the Psychic Wake and the Greater Good, and some okay newer ones for the Cadians in Warzone Octarius, but these haven't exactly boosted our rules like they seem to have done to the Tyranids, who now have some very powerful list opportunities. The proof of this is visible in the competitive scene, with 40kstats.com having us right towards the bottom of the ranking. At the time of writing, the Tau Codex hasn't been played enough in the tournament arena to boost them up, but we can safely assume they will move up the ranks given how positive some of the reviews of their new codex has been. The other potential effect of this is that Astra Militarum may actually be a relatively unpopular, unplayed faction. Simply said, not everyone is happy to take a lot of defeats, with no one being able to 100% say they enjoy losing more than they win. I mean, it's a game, and whilst playing for fun definitely rings true, we all prefer to be the winner rather than the loser. If we browse a number of registered ITC players, being those who've played at least one competitive tournament in 2021, we see all the global players by faction. Here I am at 203rd of 589 players, with 2 of my registered tournaments in 2021. Go me. Interestingly, however, there are 589 competitive Astra Militarum players in 2021. This is actually quite a lot, considering, for example, Blood Angels have had 564, Chaos Demons 367, and Knights had 466. The top meta armies did have a boatload more players, unsurprisingly, with Drakari at 1010, Adeptus Mechanicus at 725, and the Orcs at 934. What this loosely shows us is that the top meta armies are played by more players than lower meta armies, which is pretty obvious, as most people prefer to be winning more than losing, as said before. But as we can see, with Astra Militarum having 564 tournament players, this assumption isn't always true. Imperial Guard may be a faction where the supporting lore and aesthetic of the army simply is that strong that a lot of Guard players are happy to slog it out in the trenches of 9th edition, constantly beating back the enemy with lasgun and bayonet. I know personally that I play Guard due to my time in the Australian Army serving as a rifleman, and the relative nostalgia the game gives me. I think also of all the story of the 40th millennium, Imperial Guard are the most relatable of all the armies. Average men and women, fighting genetically enhanced muscle giants, Xenos taking inspirations from the Aliens movies, orcs and goblins, or technologically advanced elves or blue fish people. Also, Astra Militarum may also give you the most opportunity to easily customize and explore differing paint schemes, as opposed to, say, Space Marines, where you paint the entire army either blue, green, red, yellow, grey, or black. Boring. The numbers I just looked at are of course the competitive scene, which while important is only one aspect of the hobby. How about the casual tabletop player, the miniature collector, or the lore junkie? Here making an assessment is a lot harder, and done from more of a subjective point of view. Firstly, I think a nice assessment as to the interest in this army is the fact that my humble little YouTube channel now has 2,500 subscribers. That's obviously 2,500 people across the world with some interest in Imperial Guard. I am of course not the only content producer for Astra Militarum, with Morty and Glory now having a whopping 13,000 subscribers. This is massive, and I assume puts his subscriber base equal to or greater than some other army-specific 40k YouTube channels. Secondly, and perhaps a controversial point, is that Astra Militarum does actually receive support from GW, in the form of new miniatures and rules. Now before you throw a grenade in my tent, hear me out. The Astra Militarum model range is actually very extensive, albeit with some kits that are very old and looking quite dated. GW has added to the range of late, with the Cadian update sprue giving you some cool looking head options, the sweet looking Gaunt's Ghosts, and the Death Corps of Krieg miniatures as part of the Kill Team boxes, plus Sergeant Ripper Jackson and the Catachan Colonel, available at GW store openings. This certainly is more options than some of the other armies, of note Tyranids, which haven't had a new kit to my knowledge in many years. As you know, GW are a business like any other, focused on driving both their top line and bottom line. Would they really be releasing kits that they think wouldn't sell? Supporting this notion, I was at my local hobby store when they were preparing pre-orders for the original new Kill Team box. There was no joke about 1,000 boxes ready to ship. Now let's agree that 500 of those hobbyists who bought them were buying the kit for the new Krieg models. That's a lot of potential Astra Militarum interested players in just one hobby store in West London. Imagine this happening in hobby stores across the world, and we get a sense of the Astra Militarum community. Also, as said, GW have supported us with consistent rule updates. Most recently, the improved Lebanon Russ armor save, changes to orders, and some weird point changes. This is definitely not to say they've revolutionised our chances of winning, only that at least someone in the GW rules team is thinking about Astra Militarum. Also, we do feature in newer novels and animations being released. Catagen Devil is due for release in March, and the novel Krieg has just been released. Linked to the Kill Team release, we had that sweet launch video with a veteran guardsman fighting the Orc Commandos. We've had a dedicated new animation in the lackluster Warhammer TV, with the Cadians holding the line against the Tyranids, and we even feature in the new video game teaser for Space Marine 2. I think Astra Militarum will always be a fundamental part of the 40k story. While the Adeptus Astartes are carrying out highly surgical strikes, only fighting where they've laid out and thoroughly examined the battle space, the Imperium needs someone else to fill the other 95% of battlefronts. Again, the relatability of the Astra Militarum is this faction's greatest appeal. You don't see Tau or Tyranids being featured in many new novels, as the story of supposedly friendly space communists or a singular hive mind is pretty hard to relate to. But going back to the central point, how tough it is to play our beloved faction. As I've illustrated, in the competitive scene it's really hard, and I'd say that in the casual scene it's equally as tough. It's made tough by the fact that you may naturally not know all the tips and tricks that a more seasoned player will know. Also, a problem that any casual player will have is the complexity of 40k rules. Unless you are constantly monitoring Warhammer community, you will miss the recent rule announcements affecting Astra Militarum, or more importantly your opponent's army. At no fault of your casual opponent, they may not know of a points increase, which means their list needs to drop a unit, or a change to which units can no longer receive the benefits of a character's reroll aura. So what is the point to all my rambling? The point is that it's very important to acknowledge that it is actually really hard for guard players in 40k. Like most things, simply admitting there is a problem is most important, but I am by no means saying that anybody reject the notion that Astra Militarum 40k is really hard. So what do we do to keep a motivation up as a bottom tier army? Here I go back to a topic I looked at in another video about how to avoid boredom in 40k. This hobby can be segmented into 3 areas, being hobby, tactics and lore. If you need a break from the challenging tabletop scene, perhaps start working on some hobby projects. You could do something crazy, like buy a Bandblade like I did, never to play it on the tabletop, but simply enjoy the month-long painting process. You could explore more of the lore, buying some of the back catalogue of Astra Militarum novels, many of which will be available cheaply second-hand. You could listen to free lore videos on YouTube, including my recent one about the Gaunt's Ghost, which definitely needs a lot more views, so feel free to watch it several times if possible. Or if your passion is simply the tabletop game, you may need to start collecting another army. I personally also collect Adeptus Custodes, and do so because their playstyle is so different, and also painting them is a joy, thanks to how big they are compared to puny guardsmen. But I do personally prefer to play mostly Astra Militarum. I've taken the mindset that as long as I'm scoring between 60 and 70 victory points and not getting completely thumped, I'm okay with it. We'll most likely be one of the last to get a new codex, with my prediction being sometime in July this year. Things will get progressively harder and harder as more and more armies are updated, so the next few months are going to be an absolute slog. However, I do want to call out that you can still squeeze out victories for Astra Militarum. In the recent tournaments I've played at, I've seen Astra Militarum players go 3 victories to 2 losses, and even one go 4 for 1, and against mid to upper tier opponents. These clearly are very talented players, whom if they were playing other upper tier armies would be almost unbeatable. From this we can take inspiration, and as I've said in other videos, I'm a massive believer that often the hardest lessons are the best. If you're a brand new player who decided on Drukhari, imagine how easy it would be to simply rely upon your army's organic rule strength to carry you through. What will happen to that player when they are finally truly nerfed? or when 10th edition is released, completely throwing out the meta. But for us Guard players, with years of tough lessons, we'll be flexible in our approach, truly understanding the game's mechanics. When I served in the military, they constantly used the principle of teaching through pain, with mistakes in training being rewarded with punishments, such as 50 push-ups, running around an oval, or adopting a seat position for 5 minutes. This will require a lot of mental toughness on our behalf, being able to take a lot of defeats, or having to claw back our victories due to a minor tactical error. But serving in the Guard isn't meant to be easy. So keep your bayonet sharp, lasgun oiled, boots clean, and faith in the Emperor. We will prevail and have final, consistent glory in the tabletop. The next few months are going to be a slog, but we can do it. For the Emperor. Right, so hopefully you enjoyed that. No real point to it aside from me explaining how I feel currently as an Astra Militarum player. Hopefully you empathise with me, and more importantly, this helps keep you motivated to continue playing Astra Militarum in 9th edition. Let me know in the comments, and as always, if you want to support the channel, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing, joining my Patreon platoon, or via YouTube Super Thanks. Patreon platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Lieutenant Mitchell, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeants Brady, Adal, Gilliam, Merrill, Veterans Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Witten, Guardsman Combs, Glenn, Hills, Nitton, Nguyen, Smith, Tom, Tompkin.